Good morning, everyone. My name is Maya Luria with TMC for Seniors. And today we have a great topic for you. In December, we have been focusing on joy and how to reclaim your joy. And so today I've got with me Anne Morrison and Jill Jones. I'm sure if you have come to our classes over at TMC for Seniors, you will recognize both of these ladies. Anne works at TMC for Seniors as our program coordinator, and Jill has been a long time volunteer presenter for us. She does a fabulous job. So welcome, ladies. I'm glad you're here today. If you have questions that come up, you could be watching us this morning on our YouTube channel, or you could be watching us on Facebook. Please feel free to leave your questions in the comment box, and then Jill and Anne will be able to answer those questions at the end. So I'll go ahead and let you get started.
Well, hello, everybody. So glad to have you here today. I've got the first part of the presentation, and I will be talking about the definition of joy and happiness that's been decided by a team of researchers in the field of happiness science. And then I'll be talking about how these positive emotions affect the chemicals in our brain and also our nervous system. Then I'll turn it over to Anne, and she'll talk more about the structures of the brain and how they impact our mood, and also give you some good information and examples of how you can create more joy in your own life. So the first chart here is the definitions. Like I said, from the field of happiness science, and that field was launched in the late 80s. And it came about when some psychologists were thinking, well, they've spent all their time studying negative emotions and mental health illnesses. Why don't they study happiness and more of the positive emotions and what makes people happy? And so here's the definitions they came up with. For happiness, it really has two parts. It has to do with positive emotions, and a happy person has more positive emotions and less or fewer negative emotions. And the second part of that is they define happiness as one's general sense of well-being. It's more of a feeling of contentment, a feeling that you have a purpose in life and you like the way your life is going. Whereas joy, it's an intense experience of positive emotions. It's more momentary. It kind of happens in a moment. And you know when a person is experiencing joy, they're usually smiling or laughing, or you've heard the term jumping for joy. You don't have to ask a person, are you feeling joy? But if you ask a person how happy they are, well, then they might have to think about it a little bit. It's more reflective because they're thinking about their life overall. So I like this quote. This woman is a writer, and she develops documentaries, but she made this statement, and I thought it was a really good quote. Happiness is a destination. It's how we live our lives day to day, whereas joy is more of an attitude. And so how do we study happiness? How do the researchers study happiness? Well, like I said, it started in the 80s, and since that time, they've been surveying thousands of people and interviewing them, asking them many, many questions. But the questions fall into these two main categories, life satisfaction and emotional state. So it kind of boils down to how satisfied are you with your life? And then what positive and negative emotions are you feeling daily? And the other thing they have done is looked at identical twin studies to see if there's a genetic component. So you can move forward. Okay. So here is what they determined. Now they talked to researchers who worked on the Minnesota twin family study. I don't know, you may have heard of that. It was established in 1989. So for over 30 years, they have been collecting data on 8,000 pairs of twins. This was funded by the National Institutes of Health. So they've collected all kinds of health data and information about the lives of 8,000 pairs of twins, some identical twins, some fraternal twins. And so they asked them the questions about happiness and their general well-being. What they found was about 50% of our happiness is genetic. So we kind of have a happiness set point. And then the other part is determined by our circumstances, which we don't have control over. By circumstances, we mean things like, were you born in a poorer family or a wealthier family? Are you more attractive, less attractive? Were you born with health problems, or were you born healthy? All those things that are out of our control. And then the last part, the 40%, is what we're responsible for. So it's our habits and activities, it's our lifestyle, it's the parts of our life that we choose. So at least 40% of our life is determined by us, and that's where joy fits in the picture. Joy, and this is the key message of the whole presentation, is that joy is up to us to create. We create these joyful experiences in our life. Now, here's an example of, I was thinking about many of us seniors, especially who are isolated, who may be spending a lot more time at home and may be feeling kind of lonely. But we can just stop and take a moment, look out the window, look what's around us, and find those things that make us feel good, things that give us those joyful moments. So it's independent of our circumstances. We can think of how lucky we are to have that cup of coffee in the morning, or look out the window and I see my olive trees out there in the morning, or it can even have some memory. And anytime we do that, we're creating that joy in our bodies. Go ahead. So now for me, this is an example. These are my two dogs, Gracie and Hannah. And they give me a lot of good feelings. And sometimes I will just stop and look at them and just let those warm feelings flow through me. I'll just let that experience of joy happen while I'm looking at them. And what's happening is our dogs can smell our moods. So they know if we're happy or if we're angry, and sometimes they react to our moods, but they're actually smelling our body chemistry. And so, for instance, when I'm looking at Gracie and Hannah, and I have that bonding feeling, even though they're dogs, so they're probably smelling the hormone oxytocin, because oxytocin is known, it flows whenever we have feelings, high feelings of trust, when we're talking to a friend and we're feeling good. Dopamine is known, it's a neurotransmitter, it's known as the motivation neurotransmitter, because it motivates us to do things because we anticipate something good is going to happen. So even if we anticipate a reward coming, that dopamine will be flowing, and it gives us more energy. And endorphins, I'm sure you've heard of this, it's our body's natural pain reliever. and our endorphins flow to turn off any stress or any anxiety, and they flow whenever we're feeling good. And then serotonin, it's known as the antidepressant neurotransmitter. It helps us to feel calm, and we feel less isolated, we feel less lonely. We feel better when we have more serotonin flowing. So these brain chemicals, they are the most studied, most well-known chemicals of our mood. And to remember them, this term dose, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, if you just remember the word dose, you can remember those happy brain chemicals. So another thing that happens in our body when we're feeling positive emotions is that our vagus nerve gets activated. And our vagus nerve runs our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of fight or flight. It's the opposite of our stress system. So the vagus nerve runs from the brainstem. It's a bundle of nerves, and it connects all of these vital organs, our lungs, our heart, our stomach, our liver, our spleen, all of these, all the way down to our colon. It connects all these vital organs to our brain, and it's a communication channel. Our brain communicates with these different organs, and it's a two-way communication system. And the thing about the vagus nerve is that it responds to our thoughts. So when we're feeling positive emotions, it sends positive signals through our nervous system and dials down any experiences of stress that we might be feeling. It dials down that cortisol, even dials down the inflammation in our body. It lowers our heart rate, it lowers our blood pressure. So we want to have a strong vagus nerve. And when we do that, that's called vagal tone. And you can even measure vagal tone. People with a strong vagal tone are happier people. Look for it. And so during this time when we're experiencing a lot of stress maybe and can't wait for this year to be over with COVID happening, I have to think of some of our heroes out there, and who better than our nurses. These nurses that are, especially the ones caring for COVID patients, they're in a high stress situation, but they move through so many emotions during the day, and they feel a lot of these expressions of joy, compassion, service, kindness. They have compassion for their patients, and they're so kind with them. They're kind with the families, and they're feeling such gratitude when patients are recovering and improving. So all of these expressions of joy are causing those happy brain chemicals to flow, and they're activating their vagus nerves. And this chart came about because I had a friend of mine, Gail Black. She's a volunteer, you may know her. She and I were talking about some moments when we felt joyful moments, even during this COVID experience. When we're grocery shopping, for instance, at Trader Joe's, the clerks are more pleasant. They're trying to make a happy environment for us in spite of having to wait in line and only so many people allowed in the store at the same time. Or when we're out walking, we'll get away from a stranger. We're doing new things. We're trying new recipes because we're at home so much. We're even reconnecting with family and old friends through Zoom. So there are some positive things that are happening during this time. Next. Okay, and this is my last chart. I thought I'd give you some helpful questions to maybe ask yourself to think about how you can create your own moments of joy. Um, what are you grateful for? What kind of memories bring a smile to your face? And Anne, I'm going to turn it over to Anne now, and she'll go into more detail about what you can do to create joy in your life.
Hi again. So we happen to be having this particular presentation during the holiday season, which makes sense because I think it's usually when we see the most joy in our lives, with relatives, with friends, and with all the excitement of the lights and things and music. But we would like you to try to make this a habit. So it's a year-long habit, and it happens all the time for you. And you don't just wait for one time a year. And it is possible. So I'm going to show you how it's possible. Next slide, please. So you may not be able to read this very well. You can tell that Jill is the expert in PowerPoint because she has done it perfectly with pictures and just a few bullet points. I, on the other hand, wanted you to have all this information to keep. So I put a lot of information on the slide. I hope you'll forgive me for that, but I think eventually it'll make sense to you. So our brain, as I say in many of the classes that I teach, when we talk about brain fitness, our brain is in charge of so much that happens to us. Many of the things, physical things that happen to us. And also our brain is really in charge of our mood. So I'm going to go through really quickly a few of these areas of the brain that specifically involve the mood active centers. So the amygdala provides for emotion and memory and is also responsible for negative thoughts. So you can see if you're actively trying to build up good emotion and remember things that are pleasant for you, there's going to be less time for the amygdala to deal with negative thoughts, to bring up negative thoughts. So this part of the brain is most active during stress, anxiety, and depression. We want to keep away from that if we possibly can. The hippocampus is responsible for long-term memory, and that's where a lot of our joyful moments live. So the hippocampus is another large area that is, well, a small area, but a large part of what's involved in the brain controlling our mood. And the hypothalamus is responsible for a lot of different body regulations, but one of the most important is its responsibility to cause our body to produce cortisol. And that's what Jill told you about a little bit ago. Cortisol is what gets us revved up. If we have a stress in our lives that might involve fighting or flight, the cortisol is there to help us do that. It builds everything up. So breath rate goes up, heart rate goes up, blood pressure, muscle tension, anything that might help you. Now, unfortunately, those were things that helped us years, in our history. And they did help then. We don't have as many of those going on right now. So we don't need as much of the cortisol as we did. So I know this sounds pretty negative, the brain and mood, but there is good news. Next slide. We control our brains. Our brains do control our mood, but we are in control of our brains. Now, it may not seem that way to you. I know that, we can tell ourselves to do something and it doesn't happen, but it's a very subtle way that we need to communicate with our brain. And we do it through repetition so that repetition actually becomes a habit. When we have habits, that's our brain taking over. So we don't have to think about it anymore. So anytime you have a habit, you can be sure that that's something your brain caught on to and thought, oh, we want to do this. We want to do more of this. We want to do this at the same time every day. Little by little, our brain takes control of that for us. But we are the ones that are in control of what we tell our brain we want to do, and we do it by repetition. So I talk a lot about this in classes when I have the workshops on brain fitness. One of the things that is pretty easy to understand is, and it's a physical piece of our lives that change with the brain, but the brain changes our physical existence as well. When we practice to learn how to play something like tennis, our brain increases the muscle, especially in the dominant arm, but also in the legs, and it increases our balance. All of those areas that are involved in playing tennis well are revved up by the brain because we practice tennis. That's why people keep practicing. The more you practice, the better our mind, our brain has the idea that, oh, this is something we want to do. We need to have a better muscle tone for it. We need to have better balance. So if we then take the time that we were using to practice tennis and decide we'd like to sit in our chairs and watch TV instead, then our brain thinks, okay, we don't need to do this anymore. And that muscle tone leaves us. That's why we say, in terms of our body and our brain, use it or lose it. If we don't need it anymore, our brain picks up on that too. If we're just sitting and watching TV or not doing anything, our brain thinks, okay, we don't need the muscle tone in our legs. We don't need the balance as much. So those things start to go away. And the areas of the brain that were devoted to those things are used for other things. So this is how we speak to our brain. Subtle, and be aware it takes sometimes quite a bit of time, but you can see incremental events happening little by little that should make you feel good. So creating habits equals happiness. As we continually create these habits, little by little, we're going to feel joy. And if once we feel joy, more and more and more, that's our way of telling our brain, we want more of this. So eventually our brain is going to look for those joyful moments. And when we see something, instead of thinking a negative thought about it, we're going to think a good thought about it automatically, because our brain is just going to move that way. So that's what really brings that happiness into our life and makes all of those moments create a happy life. Next slide, please. So I've put together a whole bunch of activities. I'm going to go over just a few of them this morning. The first one I have is it's called a lot of different things. If you look on the internet, you'll see it's called the Joy Jar, and there's lots of different ways to do it. I've called it the Joy Basket because not everybody has a jar that's going to work that way. You can really use anything that you want as a container. And I'm going to hold this up. You probably can't see it. Can you see this? There. I have been using a cut glass bowl. And I use that because it's a family heirloom. So it brings me good memories. I grew up with it. My grandmother had it. My mother had it. I've got it. So it brings good memories anyway. And I also, it's big enough to hold anything I want to put in it. It's nice looking enough that I can have it out in the house wherever I'm walking. So I feel good about the fact that I might just walk by, and if I think about it when I see it, I think, I feel kind of down. I might want to bring that up a little bit, and I'll reach in and grab something. So choose something, and it really can be anything. It can be a basket, something you have around the house. I thought the other day a teapot, a fairly large teapot would be really kind of cute. But whatever you have in the house, wherever you think it would fit, where you would see it mostly and remember, in the beginning at least, to pick something out, that's what you want to use. So if you don't have something, you can go out and get something, but there's so many different things we can use. So the first thing we're going to do is that. And then the next thing we're going to do is for at least 15 to 20 days, we're going to write on either a piece of paper or something. We're going to write down something that brings us joy. And it could be the name of somebody, so it just could be one word. It could be a sentence. It could be the memory that we're writing about a vacation that we had, or it could be a holiday event that we remember that was one of the best. So we're going to write that down and put it in whatever our container is. Now, the important part of this is not just to write it down and put it in. The important part is to think about it. As Jill said when she was talking, she looks at her dogs and she thinks about and lets that joy fill her. That's what we want to do. We're not just going to read something. We want to take at least 5 minutes to let that joy fill us and remember that moment so that we feel that joy. So you can use lots of different things. A piece of paper with a note on it to yourself is good. You can also use photographs. You can use tickets to events that you went to that you absolutely loved and saved. You can use anything that gives you joy, anything that reminds you about some joy that you felt or that you want to feel in the future. So, you know, I have a little, when I went to Hawaii the last time, I got a little keychain with a little bottle of sand in it with a couple shells. That's in there. So at some points I reach in and I pull that out. And that reminds me of that vacation I had in Hawaii. And I see the sand and the shells and I remember being on the beach and how wonderful it was. So those are the kinds of things we want to put in our joy basket or bowl or whatever we're going to use for it. Let's see. So then when you add or choose an item, we talked about this, you can think about it for at least 5 minutes. You might also consider journaling because that's another great way to not only think about things, but to actually involve your body senses in writing so you get more of a memory of that. And you can go back and look at that, which is another nice piece that you can use for this. So keep in mind you might be able to journal about this as well. Again, for at least 5 minutes. And then when you finish with the item you've pulled out, put it back in. So after the 15-20 days, you don't have to add any more items. From then on, you're going to just be pulling items out whenever you think about it. And I suggest that you plan some specific, at least one specific time of the day. You know, maybe as you go out in the kitchen in the morning to get your coffee. But it's the more repetition we have, the better. So if you can pull something out of the bowl and think about that and be joyful about that for 5 minutes, 10 times a day, 5 times a day, 3 times a day, all the better. The more you can do that, the better, because our brain is going to catch on to that and build that habit. So there's lots of other activities that you can do that are going to bring joy on. And I'm going to start just by giving you some ideas with this. We use our senses for lots of things, and our senses are really connected to our brain. So when I see the holiday lights at the Christmas season, at Hanukkah season, I am over the world excited about joy. I am thrilled about it. So you can recreate those kinds of things and look for those kinds of things. They're not going to be around the rest of the year, but you can create those kinds of things in your home. You can leave Christmas lights or Hanukkah lights or other kinds of things up. If it brings you joy, don't worry about what time of year it is. If Hanukkah brings you joy, leave the menorah out, because whatever's going to bring you joy is good to have around and remind you of it. Now, people may look at you oddly and think, it's not Hanukkah anymore. It's not Christmas anymore, but don't worry about it. We're building happiness and it's worth it. So we want to use as many senses as we can. So sight is a really important sense. I actually put pictures of things I like and of sayings with pictures I like up around my house. I do small ones, maybe on my bathroom mirror in the morning, on a kitchen cabinet, on my door as I leave for work, on different areas of my house. When I pass by or I am in that room and I see them, that makes me feel joy. So anything that you can do that's going to make you feel joy is great. I put up here videos of puppies, could be kittens. It's really hard to be unhappy if you're looking at videos on YouTube of kittens and puppies. I actually ended up getting a puppy. So I'm just like Jill. I look at that puppy and I've got an older dog. They love each other to death. They play so beautifully together. You can tell how much they love each other. And sometimes I just look at them and I laugh because they're so funny together. And that joy just fills me. So I'm not telling you to go get a puppy or a kitten, but just in case, you can always watch the videos of them. Smell is also another really important sense that we have that brings back great memories. So you can use scented candles for this. I actually look for really good pine candles, the scent of pine, and I use it all year because it still makes me feel good no matter what time of year I use it. But those things are really good. I also have other items that make me feel good. So baking, Jill mentioned that cooking different recipes. My grandmother baked bread, my mother baked bread. The smell of baking bread brings that memory back to me, makes me feel good. But I also went out and cut some grass out of, and I continue to do this, cut some grass out of a park. And the smell always in my life, the smell of newly mowed grass brings me back to when I was about 5 years old in a playground in a park. And I mean, it will instantly take me back there when I smell it. So those kinds of smells, think about what makes you feel joyful when you smell it, and plan on having those things around. It wouldn't be bad to put some grass or whatever you think is good in the envelope. And instead of seeing something, pick the envelope out of your bowl or your basket and just smell that. Hearing music, and I can't say this enough, music has a straight line to joy in our brains. And I know you've probably felt this when you've gone to concerts with somebody that you just absolutely love and you love the music. It has to be some kind of uplifting music. It can't be sad music to make you feel joyful. That doesn't mean you can't listen to sad music because it's still beautiful, but uplifting music is great. This time of year, I listen to Christmas music, and there's a couple Hanukkah songs that I absolutely love that I listen to over and over. And I don't do that all year, although I do it sometimes. Most of the rest of the year is filled with Irish music and folk songs, things like that. So there's still feel-good kinds of things. So that takes me back too, because our family had Irish music all the time. And so think about turning the TV off sometimes and just listening to the music, maybe getting some work done around the house instead. I also, when I talk to, I don't have much family left, but I have a niece and her family and her 2 children in Maryland. And whenever I get off the phone with her, I feel like somebody just hugged me. I mean, that's the most joyful I feel, really. So, and I tell her that all the time. So an email from her is great. A text from her is great because I think, oh, she's thinking of me. But talking to her on the phone and hearing her is the best. Touch is also important. So you can bake and do crafts and things like that will actually also bring that feel good feeling to you. And taste, we've heard of the term comfort foods. Whenever you're down, eating something that's a comfort food that makes you feel good and reminds you of when things were really good is also another piece you can add to this. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to talk to you about, because part of being joyful is an easy piece to add to your life to make it happen is laughter. But I can't talk to you about laughter until I talk to you about breathing. So there's a very direct relationship between breath rate, our mood, and our autonomic nervous system. And as we discussed earlier, as we heard earlier, the autonomic nervous system governs the body's sympathetic, that is fight or flight, and the parasympathetic, rest and restore responses, dialing up or down the heart rate, respiration, digestion, whatever it is, in response to potential threats or to relax after a potential threat. So it worked great years and years ago in our human history. But right now, what's happening is we don't need it that much, but we still get the same response when we have phone calls, when we hear the phone ring, when emails come in, when there's news, especially news updates, especially negative ones. It trips the body's alarms. without really a good reason, and gives us that fight or flight piece, because then we start to get upset. So Jill talked about this, about the vagus nerve, how it activates these two responses. But, you know, we can also control that, because our brain actually controls sending out the cortisol and involving the vagus nerve to our other organs. However, breathing can make that go in the opposite direction, and we're in control of our breathing. So once we slow our breathing down, that takes us right back into rest and relax. And that will happen when you do that pretty quickly. So you'll see how well that works. So if you're upset or excited about something, take slow breaths and deep breaths, and do that for, you know, maybe 10 breaths. Continue doing it until you feel that sense of rest and relax again. Okay, the last is laughter. Now, how many of you can, we're going to go to the next slide. How many of you can have experienced being depressed or down or anxious when you're laughing? Probably not many, especially if you're actually laughing at something you think is funny. So another good reason to watch the puppy and kitten videos, but I also would try to choose things that you're going to be watching and being around that are going to make you laugh. And it could be just somebody else you're with. Some people my friends make me laugh. Some don't. Doesn't mean they're not good friends, but the ones that make me laugh are going to make me feel happier, because I'm going to start doing that. So when you laugh, you're doing that breathing, that slow breathing, you're doing it naturally. We're taking breaths in, we're big breaths, we're letting big breaths out. So that is, again, taking us to a rest and relaxation spot. So it's very difficult to be sad or depressed or anxious when you're laughing. So I suggest to you, I'm recommending that you look for funny things, that you have yourself in positions where you're watching funny things. I actually, after I finished this presentation, I went and recorded or added to my record list all of the funny shows that were on before Christmas, because I didn't have all of them checked. So now I'm watching I've watched many of them a few times, but it doesn't hurt to watch them again. I love all of them. So I've gone into the Comedy Channel and other kinds of things to get some funny things to lift me up. And I'd suggest that you start doing that. Once you start doing that, when you start making a habit of this, when our brain eventually takes over, you're not going to have to do it as much. You're going to see things that make you laugh and make you happy, instead of thinking, oh, that was really dumb. You know, it's going to build you up instead of bring you down. So I have included a whole lot of, next slide, please. I think, yeah. I'm going to send a whole bunch of handouts to you to give you additional ideas and some additional thoughts that I might not have covered in this particular presentation in the time we have. But you're free to print them if you want to. Don't print them if you don't want to waste the paper on any of them. Just take a look at them, see if it's something you're interested in, and then you can make use of those, because the more information we have about this, the better it's going to be, the easier it's going to be for us to do it. And I want to leave you with the thought to remember your brain controls your mood, and you're in charge of your brain. And last slide, please. We also want to suggest that you choose joy.
Thank you so much. That was great and had a lot of ideas about joy. I actually wanted to show you, we had done joy jars over here at TMC for Seniors, and it's just a mason jar that we used. So just as Anne has a nice vase that she uses, or a bowl, we just used a jar that we could do, and we've labeled it with, you know, it is our joy jar. So so I think that's great. I had one of our viewers actually was saying how much she was enjoying the presentation. So that's wonderful.
I wish I'd have thought of that. Good.
Yes, it was perfect. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Laugh.
I also have, and very excited about the handouts as well. So that's wonderful. Somebody mentioned that they have been incorporating laughter yoga into their morning routine as another way, because also using the exercise, doing this exercise for 15 minutes has been helping their mood. And brings a lot more positivity to their life. So that there's another option there for folks. So thank you so much for being here today. That was wonderful. We will go ahead and anyone who had registered for this presentation will go ahead and email out those additional handouts. I had just had somebody say, I feel happier already. So
good.
So that's wonderful. And if you are watching this later on and would like those handouts, please feel free to reach out to us at TMC for Seniors. The phone number is 520-324-1960, and we would be happy to email those materials to you as well. So thank you, ladies, for being here.
Bye.
And everyone has some more joy in their life.
Right.
Bye.